Morning and welcome to CookBook, brought to you by Sundress Academy for the Arts. Today we are going to be learning how to make red beans and rice with our guest Zackary Hill. Zack is a member of the Western program at Miami University. He's an advisor, helps with students. He's a writer, a poet, screenwriter. And today he's going to teach us how to make these red beans and rice, and then we're going to sit down and get to talk to him about all the things he's working on now, what it's like to work at Western, and what the projects are, and how you actually go about writing a movie, which is something I've never been able to do. So I'm excited to hear how that works. So, welcome to CookBook. Zackary Hill here, who's going to teach us how to make red beans and rice today, which is something I've never actually made. So how do we do this?
Well, we've already got some white onion going here. Just a basic saute. Start off medium temperature, lower the heat after you've stirred around a little bit. Just want to get nice translucent brown before we add some peppers.
Okay.
We've got some chorizo going here. As I told you, if you want to go vegetarian, you can use tofu or like a portobello cap or something like that. We've already cooked our rice. So now I've got the onion going well. I'm going to just get this red pepper going. Going to get it in there with the onion and the jalapeno to give it a nice kick. And that's, we'll let that go for 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
Add the beans, let it all simmer down. Add our spices, a little salt, pepper, and garlic.
And why the wine vinegar?
Well, so in the South, traditionally you would top your red beans and rice with some raw onion.
Okay.
In this case we have a yellow onion here.
Sure.
And a sausage of some kind, of protein. Traditionally somewhat spicy.
Okay.
So then to balance that heat, you want something with a little acidity, and that's where the vinegar comes in. It helps balance out the flavors a lot. So that's why the vinegar.
And we went ahead and pre-cooked the rice because the rice is what takes the longest to make. It took about 45 minutes?
Give or take.
Okay.
Because we went with brown.
Right.
If you want to use whites, you can. If you want to really speed things up, you can use boil in a bag, and then it's almost foolproof. Can't mess up the boil in a bag.
This is your opportunity to brag about your rice cooker at home if you want.
I do have a rice cooker at home. It's good for things beyond rice.
Okay.
I'm going to use it for quinoa.
All right.
I've used wheat berries.
Sure.
If you're familiar with
I don't know what wheat berries
I was
are.
going to say, you said sure, like you knew what I was talking about.
I'm going with you. I didn't want to be rude.
Yeah. I've done kamut.
I don't know what kamut is.
Like quinoa, it's an ancient grain.
Okay.
But yeah, you can use the rice cooker for anything.
So how much of this is actual
fried.
sorcery that you're talking about and not cooking food?
Well, sometimes I just close my eyes and hope that it works out.
That sounds good.
That's more or less what we're doing here.
All right.
So, nope, left the lid on. Wondering why nothing came out.
No, one time I dumped a whole thing of sugar while we were doing this. It's fine.
Is there anything in here?
Should be something. If not, we got this right here.
Don't want to grind. Did you get sugar because someone had undone the cap?
No, that was all of a sudden I had to measure something on camera and just did it very poorly.
Did you use a measuring cup or a spoon?
No, I did a cup, but I was pouring and it just went everywhere and I acted like it didn't happen. But if you watch the video, you can see that there's just sugar all over the place.
Well,
not smooth.
did you taste it afterwards?
It was still good. This was the molasses cookies.
Okay, well then the sugar. Yeah.
Totally.
Sugar is important there because molasses, though sweet, has a bit of a gumminess to it.
Those were good.
Yeah, I'm not a baker.
Okay.
I'm no help there. I feel like you're slacking on your meat food.
Sorry, this was on me. I'm the meat guy.
I can't do everything, Darren.
Which is a t-shirt I will never have made.
My wife's a vegetarian, so I don't cook much meat.
This is true.
So Darren's supposed to be in charge of the meat.
And I've just been talking this whole time.
That's true. How spicy would you like this?
As far as you want to go.
I mean,
I trust you.
I prefer not terribly spicy, so I usually remove most of the inside. of the jalapenos.
Sure.
A lot of people think it's the seeds that's the heat. It's actually the kind of white stuff around the seeds. That's where the heat is.
Okay.
I forget the chemical name of what's actually in there. I think it starts with a C.
You could make one up.
Yeah. If I was teaching right now, I would make one up. And then I
Just so you wouldn't lose that seed of authority, that sort of...
No, I have no authority.
Okay.
And they all know that. Much like with our relationship, I invite a certain level of disrespect.
That's fine.
So,
I don't think anybody's ever had any authority.
what, in our relationship?
Yeah.
I like to think that
We wait for each other to make mistakes, and then we pounce. All right.
We pounce.
Like the fact that I don't own a rice cooker. You can
Well, you know, I'm upset about that.
You're used to a certain kind of cooking, a certain standard.
You live long enough, I'm going to get you a rice cooker.
50th birthday?
Maybe. You gonna make it to 50?
I gotta live that long.
How old will I be?
What, you're 2 years older than me?
I don't know.
I'm 34.
Alright.
Year and a
When
half.
did you turn 34?
March 24th.
Okay, so you're going to turn 35.
Coming up, yeah.
So
that rice cooker's almost mine.
And I'm just barely, I'm not even 2 years older than you. Because I won't be 37 till May.
Wow.
So is this meat done?
It's getting close. Just let it go. It's okay. You're not eating it anyway.
I'll eat it. Julie won't eat it, but I'll eat it. So our onion and pepper mixture is looking good at this point.
You put the beans in with it?
I do like that bean. Some people don't.
Okay.
They like to cook the beans separately.
Why would they cook it separately? Is there a plus to that?
Depends on who you talk to.
Okay. Are you just being lazy right now?
No. See, I like cooking it, and I'm actually going to up the heat.
Okay.
Because I like getting the juices and the beans cooked to where it mixes with everything. It almost becomes almost like a refried taste to it.
Okay.
But this is largely, again, because of the vegetarian aspect. It gives a little more umami flavor, if you will.
Umami, okay.
That's you familiar with umami?
I'm not.
No? So you've got...
There's a lot of things I don't know, apparently.
You've got sweet,
okay,
sour,
okay,
salty,
sure,
and bitter.
right.
Okay, those are the four basic flavors. Umami is an Asian flavor
Okay.
that is starting to get some ground in...
And where does it fall on that pattern of taste?
It doesn't. It's a textural and savoriness. So it's something associated with like meat and mushrooms. Kind of an, you know.
Sure.
Savory is as close as I can get for you. But umami.
Sounds good.
U-M-A-M-I. So I would say let this cook for 5 to 10 minutes, stirring occasionally till the beans get kind of soft in there with it.
And then when it's done,
we'll take the rice, put it on a plate, put that on top of the rice.
When do we add the vinegar?
At the end, with the cilantro and the raw onion.
Okay.
It's all topping.
Okay. How much vinegar do you put in?
That is to taste. I am a vinegar fan. I will drizzle a lot. I will drown it.
Okay.
How do you like salad dressing on the salads? Do you just put a little bit, or do you
just a little bit?
See, I'm a soaker.
You're a soaker?
Yeah, I like to
So like you pick up the leaf and it drips. Okay.
Yeah. So everybody makes their own plate.
Sure.
When it comes to my red beans and rice, other people, you know, they'll mix everything together and say go to it. But I like having the individual ingredients and allowing you to have some control over it as well.
Okay. Well, we're going to let this cook up and add the final ingredients. We're going to finish the chorizo, and then we'll put it all together, and we'll show you what it looks like. Then we can sit down and talk to Zack. We have the red beans and rice with the chorizo and the onions and cilantro on top. It looks pretty. It might be the prettiest dish we've made on CookBook here. So why red beans and rice? Where did you start?
Well, it's a very traditional Southern food.
But you're Swedish.
Well, my mom's Swedish. My dad's Southern. I grew up.
That's true. Tennessee.
Grew up in Tennessee. Beans cheap, rice cheap. Meat usually expensive. So this red beans and rice, good vegetarian food, but also good for poor people as well. Because do you know why? Red beans. Well, not just red beans, but beans and rice in general.
The protein?
They make a perfect protein.
Okay.
So what's lacking in a bean a rice has and what's lacking in rice bean has. So together they make a perfect protein.
Okay.
Which is often difficult for vegetarians to get outside.
So we went saucy when we added the meat.
We did. We got saucy with it. But to me, it works well, especially with a spicy sausage. Helps balance out with what I was saying before, especially when you add in vinegar.
Okay. All right. So tell me about the job on Western campus.
Okay, so I'm the coordinator and advisor for the Western program at Miami University. It's called Western because it used to be the Western College for Women.
Right.
Yeah, from 1855 to 1974.
You've got the dates.
I know a lot.
Right.
I have to do a pitch to people often. It was actually 72, and then it was co-ed until 74, and then Miami absorbed it. But now we're getting into the weeds of the details. Then it became the School of Interdisciplinary Studies for about 30 years in Miami, and then it became a major within the College of Art and Science. So technically, it's the Individualized Studies major, which means that students create their own major, bringing together multiple disciplines to do something that they want.
And this all sort of leans into their senior project? Sort of?
Very much so.
Okay.
Yeah. So right now I'm working with a senior who is combining music and art.
Okay.
And does a lot of sculpture work. For his senior project, he is making a Tesla coil and a Rubens tube.
What is a Rubens tube?
I don't know.
Okay.
This is how I understand it.
Sure. You've been doing this to me all day, though, so you've been saying things today.
I'm excited to see how this goes.
Yeah.
I'm worried it's going to blow up on us.
Okay.
But it's a tube.
Sure.
And you put holes in different spaces throughout.
And you can make music.
And you run propane through it.
Okay.
And light it where it's coming out. And then I think you play like music, so like the flames are based on the music, like the intervals and everything.
Okay.
So a lot of people use Tesla coils to make music.
Sure.
So he's going to try to play the Tesla coil and make this artistic display with the Rubens tube and Tesla coil.
So the music itself won't come from the tube, that'll just be...
From the Tesla coil.
Okay.
Though he might invite like musicians to play like guitars and stuff to sort of augment it. He hasn't exactly figured out the
science of it still
yet.
Okay.
I'm excited, but that's just one example of something somebody's doing. We have another student we're sending to South Africa to work on his project. He's doing sustainability in sub-Saharan Africa.
Okay, which is tough to pull off in Ohio.
Very fancy, yeah. So
right.
He's going to Africa for spring break.
These are the more creative of the Miami students.
Well, not always.
Okay.
We get largely two types of students: those who know exactly what they want to do and are very focused and driven, but there isn't a specific major that applies to what they want to do. And then we get those that have no idea what they want to do, but they have a lot of interests. And before they know it, they've taken all of these different classes and they start asking themselves, how do I combine these? What am I doing? And I have to graduate. How am I getting out of here?
They gave us the opportunity to do that kind of thing at Worcester. It wasn't its own like part of the school, but if you wanted to create a major, you could sort of pitch them on it, and as long as you got the documentation and the approval, you could do it. Yeah,
the idea of a create your own major is something that exists at the vast majority of colleges and universities. Most of them are smaller than Western in terms of departments. Usually it's like a chair and an advisor, and then they take classes from other stuff and combine it and do a project.
And the committee would sort of be like interdisciplinary
At Western, we're kind of bridging the gap between interdisciplinary studies and individualized studies because we used to be the School of Interdisciplinary Studies. So a lot of that was when it was the Western College program. Now it's just the Western program and it's its own major. So we are often in this struggle between connecting to and maintaining our past, but also moving more towards the college's needs and students' needs and what they want to do. So there's this juggling. So the major is 48 hours. 24 hours of those are the create your own part, and the other 24 hours are Western-specific courses. And that's what differentiates us from most of the create your own majors, is we have our own specific required courses that help students understand and figure out how to combine disciplines and integrate them to answer large questions.
And so you sort of advise them from the beginning all the way to the completion
Oh yeah,
of the thesis?
I am the chief departmental advisor for all of the students.
You should have worn a hat today.
No. My main role is more from the academic side.
Okay.
What do they need to graduate? How are they getting there? What classes? All of that.
Right.
They're also assigned Western faculty advisors who get much more into the specifics of their interests and their project.
So I imagine the rest of the student body has a much larger sort of collection of people helping them work through Miami. Is it just you? Or you're the guy and you're helping everyone on Western?
Yes.
Okay.
But they can go to their faculty advisors as well, and they can go to College of Arts and Science advisors as well, since we're in CAS. But we're a fairly small major at the moment. So right now, I can handle it. We have 66, 67 majors.
Sure.
So it's not crazy.
Right.
Given week,
all of them
crazy.
At different points.
Right, exactly.
I imagine from this point on, in this year will be sort of crazy with everyone trying to finish, but...
the beginning of the semester is the craziest.
Okay.
Because they have to apply for graduation early. So this past Friday was actually the apply for graduation deadline, so I had to be on the seniors to get that.
Okay.
And I've been hounding them for the last 4 or 5 months.
Showing up outside their classes, knocking on their dorm rooms, things like that.
I've gone to the senior seminar class many times.
Okay. Just wait outside.
Tell them what they need to do.
Flipping a quarter. Smoking a pipe.
No, I'm invited.
Okay, that's good.
I'm an honored guest.
Sure.
Much like I am today. I haven't cooked for them yet.
Well, someday.
But
they got to graduate for that sort of treatment.
Not necessarily.
No. Okay.
Some of them are,
All right. Well, when you and I went to Miami together, you did poetry, and now
Yes.
you're doing screenwriting.
That is correct.
How did that end up happening? Like what?
I stopped writing poetry.
But why?
That's how that happened.
Why? Why is that?
Well, there was a middle ground in there. I
Okay.
actually wrote some fiction between the poetry and the screenwriting, and that didn't really go anywhere either.
Okay. It all sounds like betrayals to me.
It does, and life is one constant betrayal. This is something I talked about in my thesis defense.
Okay.
Actually, if I can go back to 2005, this came up a lot because they more or less asked why poetry, and I said, well, it's what it is right now. My brother wrote poetry for a long time, but he stopped.
Well, he's an artist.
And now he's an artist.
He
does visual art. He's a painter by and large, does sculpture and everything, but he's a visual artist. My dad wrote poetry for a long time, but then he shifted into woodworking. So I often wondered, am I going to stick with poetry or no?
So this is just what the hill men do.
This is what the hill men do.
Okay, they start with poetry and then they find
move on to something else.
Sure. But what got you to latch on to screenwriting? Like what?
So in 2009, give or take, my brother-in-law and my current writing partner Matt, they had been writing cheesy B horror movie scripts together for a while, just for fun and to have readings of people.
Sure.
So Matt wanted to get a little more serious, try something, for real. So he said, hey guys, who wants to do something? I was like, I'd love to try to figure out what doing. So Matt and my brother-in-law Mike and my friend Tom and I started writing this thing, and before we knew it, Mike and Tom had kind of fallen by the wayside, and Matt and I just kept going and finished a script. And
you guys have been working together for 6 years?
6.5 years now at this point, I guess.
All right. And what have the topics of the screenplay been like?
We've done primarily more serious things.
Okay.
We did one comedy.
I don't think I ever read the comedy. Was it Buddy Cop? What was we talking about?
It was kind of a buddy road trip.
Nice.
Kind of a thing, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're actually working on a romantic comedy at the moment, but it's been on the back shelf for a while, but we have like 70 pages of it. I just haven't gotten to it. Okay. I go in cycles where I'm ultra productive for
you're finishing
3 months, and then, we've finished 9 or 10 full-length features now, and a pilot, and then we have that romantic comedy that's 3/4 done, and another pilot that's 3/4 done, and then this adaptation of the novel that is 2/3 done.
Okay.
And then we have the idea for what we're going to film ourselves in the fall.
So after all the screenwriting, you're now going to actually make a movie.
That's the goal.
The movie is based on, what was the book?
No, the movie's not based on that.
Okay.
That's
That's something different.
That's something different. The adaptation is something different.
Okay.
That we can't afford to make that ourselves.
Okay.
Way too big of a cast, and
sure.
we can't go to the Arctic Circle. So no. Okay.
So what are the ideas for the movie you're going to make? Obviously you haven't written it yet, but what are the ideas?
What if I tell you that someone steals it?
This is a good point.
Yeah. Not that, I mean, that's an absurd thing. There's no new ideas. It's all about execution.
Okay.
So that's you know, really silly of me to say, but people are paranoid about that stuff all the time.
No, I got you. So tell me this, as someone who studied poetry and spent a lot of time writing it, how does that transfer? How do those skills transfer over to screenwriting?
Really well.
Okay.
I think. So for me, the biggest distinction between poetry and, say, fiction is the way that you have to boil down to specific language. You have less space traditionally for poetry, unless you're writing a sweeping epic. But you know, there's Chris Cheek gets down to a definition of poetry as language under pressure.
Okay, that makes sense.
Which I like. So. Screenwriting, there's really an economy of space to it, which goes well with poetry. Right. And this, you have to focus...
As opposed to the novel or things like that.
Right, exactly, where it can be sprawling.
Sure.
Each individual word is not going to be examined as closely.
Okay.
Right? So, screenwriting is similar in that you have less space and you really have to focus in on how am I going to convey as much information as possible in as little space as possible.
So try to make the scenes and the dialogue as particular as possible so that there's no sort of wasted space.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course it's ultimately meant to be a visual medium when it becomes a film, and a lot of poetry is meant to be descriptive and visual as well. So there are natural overlaps. The main difference is structure.
Okay.
I mean, the screenwriting is a very specific structure.
Narrative arc and so forth.
Not just in terms of plot structure. I mean, specifically in terms of how it's written. I mean, you have your headline, so your slug line, so interior, exterior, and your location.
There's a template that you've got to adhere to.
Yeah. If you're filming it yourself, you don't have to adhere quite so closely. But if you're trying to write a spec script for someone to look at, then they
can understand and execute it.
Thing. Yeah.
Sure.
So you have your locations and your slug lines, and you have action lines where you're focusing on character and physical description of place and actually what happens. You know, and those you're trying to have very short snippets, 2 or 3 line paragraphs bouncing between, and then you have character and dialogue.
Right. So I'm well aware of the sort of the difficulties in trying to pull off a successful poem, entry points, exit points, rhythm, music, line breaks, all those things that you got to sort of toy with while you're trying to get some sort of image or scene or whatever. What are the difficulties of screenwriting? Like, how's that different? Like, if there's a template and there's certain things that the presentation has to be, what's the difficulty of pulling it off?
Well, I suppose it depends on what ultimately your goal is. If you're trying to write a Hollywood movie, then you need to have certain beats and certain large moments built into it.
Okay.
But beyond that, it's making sure that every scene actually serves a point, rather than you just going off on a tangent saying, boy, I love these characters.
That's just nice, or I really like this dialogue. Or,
which is fine if you're Tarantino and you're going to film it yourself and it's going to be 3 hours long.
Sure.
I mean, he's great with dialogue. But otherwise...
He gives himself plenty of room to have that great dialogue.
Of room,
But most people don't get to make a 3-hour movie.
Right, and most people have then a 20-minute scene to explore, the meaning of like a virgin.
Sure.
Which is great, but most people aren't going to be able to get away with that.
Right.
So really, a lot of it has to do with making sure that there's some type of conflict in every scene, and yet that scene is either connecting to the overall plot or exploring and examining and showing some aspect of the character that's important.
Okay.
I mean, those are the 2 big things that you need. So making sure every scene is doing that while also being entertaining.
Sure.
That's the
and then in the Hollywood angle, the expectation that there's going to be certain things at certain parts, that's got to up the
Sure,
ante
I mean, you've got very traditional arc. In this case, it's a 3-act structure, which is really just a 5-act structure boiled down to 3. So you have, a first act where you have an inciting incident, halfway through the first act, and then at the end of the first act, the main character's on their way to their journey.
Okay.
And then second act, where there's reversals and back and forth, actually trying to achieve their goal and overcome their antagonist. And somewhere in the middle of the second act, a midpoint shift where perhaps they get what they want and it's not quite working out, and they have to again reverse their position some way. Often involves a death of some kind. It's crazy how many movies have a death at that midpoint. And then, you know, moving to the climax, usually spanning the second act, third act break, and then.
Well, is it that expectation that makes sort of the Hollywood movies more uniform? So, I mean, like, they want them to be so there's not a lot of wiggle room in terms of how they're written. Is that, I mean, so we get a lot of the movies that look like they're the same movies over and over again.
Well, there are a lot of people that have written how to write a movie books.
That's like whole shelves in bookstores, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Right. There's a number of them.
You guys gave me writing movies for dummies book at one point, I believe.
Probably.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a number of them, and, you know, like, I think Blake Snyder has one, McKee has one, it's Robert McKee. You know, there's a ton of them that are considered like the go-tos, and a lot of them have basically the same structures, but worded differently.
Sure.
Like there's a beat sheet that, you know, people say this has to happen by page 7. This has to happen on page 22.
What has to happen by page 7? Like, what is the...
Sometimes the inciting incident.
Okay.
I mean, for me, I say...
Death of the father or something. Yeah.
But I mean, there's so many movies that have that before page 1.
Right.
Where the inciting incident is even off screen.
Sure.
But, you know, for what the expectation of is a traditional arc, a lot of it is, you know, who's the hero with 1,000 faces in the hero's journey? Campbell.
Okay.
Right. Joseph Campbell? Don't you, Adam?
It sounds good.
Yeah, I think it's Joseph Campbell. Okay. I mean, that's what a lot of Star Wars and George Lucas and Indiana Jones. I mean, this idea of the hero's journey. You know, that they have a huge goal. They set out. They have obstacles. They meet helpers along the way. Okay. You know, they hit certain things along the standpoint. Then you have, I forget his name, Gardner, maybe? Wrote Grendel. I'm going to draw a blank. But, so there's an old saying that says there's 2 types of movies. A stranger comes to town. Okay. Or someone goes on a journey. Okay. And he said it's really the same story. It's just different. The angle you're telling it. Sure. Exactly. So it's just the hero journey is taking one of those angles and saying, okay, they're going on a journey.
Well, out of all those sort of expectations, there's only so many ways to do it. How do you like to do it? Like, how do you like to structure? Like, what's the screenplay that you were most proud of? Like, how was it put together? Well, Chasing Oblivion was a quarter finalist in the Academy Award Nickel Fellowships. Okay. As the granddaddy of screenplay contests. Sure. They have like 800. So why was that successful? 8,000 entrants. I don't know what. No, I don't know. Okay. Successful. It's good. So it was quarter finalist, meaning it made like the top 350 out of 8,000, 9,000 scripts or something. Okay. That's the most prestigious one. It also was a semi-finalist in the American Zoetrope contest, which is Francis Ford Coppola's. Wow. So that means it was the top 33 out of a couple thousand. So how did you structure that? Like, it's very much a hero's journey. Okay. It follows a young woman, Lita, and really focused on the first 10 pages being kind of like a microcosm of the entire script as a whole. So I like to introduce our main character and the general idea of what the story is going to be, and give some introduction to the antagonist within the first 10 pages so that we all know what's going to happen, or at least who we're dealing with in there. Doesn't give a lot of room for character development. That's the biggest challenge in that. But so then the inciting incident of that one really is that she finds out that her dad was probably not who she thought he was. And then it becomes a journey to figure out who he was and what really happened to him. Sure. So she's given information about this larger conspiracy
element, and then she goes on this journey trying to figure out what happened, and people are trying to stop her from doing stuff because it's a big deal. It's very, in terms of beats and setups, it's very much along the lines of Enemy of the State. If you remember that, Will Smith, Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman.
Yeah. So he gets this CD with information, a senator's been killed or something.
Jason Lee dies in that, doesn't he? Like at the beginning?
Is that right? Yeah, I think you're right. That's who gives him
he gives him the information.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. And then the rest of the movie is he's trying to figure out this information, get it to the right people, and people are trying to kill him and stop him from.
So it's sort of put together like that.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a big chase movie in a lot of ways.
Nice.
Trying to get from information to people and find the people that you can actually trust.
Okay.
With fun enemies, fun
evil
twists.
People show up trying to kill her.
The evil's a matter of perspective.
Okay.
I mean, the antagonist is really the protagonist of their story.
Sure.
Right. You can't just say they're evil for the sake of evil. They have a point.
Right.
The villain of that has, on a certain level, a noble goal.
Okay.
But it's crazy. So it's been twisted and corrupted.
So it started out noble, and now the execution has gone slightly astray.
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
so that worked because it. Now, did that work because it hit some of the sort of more common themes, or that worked because you just did a really good job putting that together?
I'd say both.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to think that we're getting better and better at putting things together.
Sure.
And now things are working more because we're actually good writers as opposed to following a formula.
Right. So how much is that like the Malcolm Gladwell, like we need to do this for a long time before we're really good at it? Or
yeah, no, that is very true.
Maybe not necessarily just 10,000 hours, but...
Yeah, no, I'm sure that there are people who are naturals, because that's in every field. There are people that just pick up stuff and run with them, and people hate them. But no, it's very true. Looking back on some of our early scripts, I'm kind of embarrassed. But, I mean, that Chasing Oblivion one was a revision of our second script, which when I look back on it was not good. It had good ideas, but it was really it was 120 pages and it was more of a drama. And now it's 100 pages and it's more of a thriller.
Sure. Well, you cut it down, you make it more of it was a journey, it was a race, you're trying to...
But no, just learning the structure and the format that's expected is one thing, and then trying to combine that with good storytelling, dynamic characters that are compelling and have an arc, visuals that are easy to follow but also filmable and visually
and they do some work themselves.
Yeah,
sure.
Because again, you have to keep in mind that it's going to be a movie. It's not just to be read. So now, out of the 10 scripts we've written, 3 or 4 of them have been rewritten multiple times. I mean, realistically, we've probably written closer to 15 or 16 scripts because of the action. I mean, you wouldn't recognize Chasing Oblivion from when it was 20 years ago. Totally different thing. Okay. So, of those, if we say 15 or 16, if I include rewrites of stuff that was not so good initially, I would say we're currently happy with 4 or 5, not embarrassed by an additional 2 or 3, and then there's 4 or 5 things I've never watched.
How does the writing process work with a partner?
It varies a lot.
Okay, because obviously you guys aren't in the same room the whole time.
No, very rarely.
Lots of emails and notes, that kind of thing.
A lot of emails.
Okay.
Yeah. Often we'll have the idea, and we'll hammer out the idea together pretty strongly, and then we'll do an outline. A very big proponent and believer in outlining. Sure. Because otherwise, how do you know that you have a movie as opposed to a short story?
You gotta have a tether. You gotta have something that you can hold on to while you're going with the show.
So I mean, I'll do Act 1, first 10 pages, rest of Act 1, Act 2. I'll even number it sometimes. Get between 50 and 70 scenes, depending on length of scene, is what you're shooting for. Okay.
And the range is 100 short. Is 100 like
pages?
Yeah, 100 pages.
Between 90 and 120 is the common. So if you're looking at like a drama, you're going to be on the 120 side. If you're a comedy or a horror,
90. And does a page equal a minute?
A page to a minute, yeah. That's the expectation.
Okay.
And that's more of an average because obviously some pages are going to be
dialogue heavy
and be much less than that. Sure. Some are going to be, you know, an action sequence that's going to actually take 3 minutes, but since it's all prose, it's going to be on one page.
So when you went back and you started sort of studying screenwriting more than poetry, what which screenwriters, like, what did you look at and you're like, well, damn, that one's really great. How did
love Charlie Kaufman.
Okay.
But that's a difficult one to pull off since he's so unconventional and crazy. I mean, love being John Malkovich, but not really a Hollywood movie.
Right.
Eternal Sunshine, Spotless Mind, one of my favorite movies. You know, it's great. So that was more from a what's possible standpoint.
Sure. And like, how did he do this?
Exactly. As far as like structure and really understanding it, William Goldman is great.
Okay.
Butch Cassidy's Sundance Kid. Princess Bride.
Okay.
Somewhere in between those two, playing with structure but also exploring interesting ways of approaching a story.
Okay.
Really enjoy Christopher Nolan.
Okay.
At least his early work.
Memento.
Prestige.
Sure.
Those would be what I would consider his top two things.
Right.
I think he's getting worse and worse as a writer. I think because he's a director now, so I think he puts more effort into the directing standpoint.
His brother writes for him, right? Is that
sometimes?
Sometimes, okay.
Yeah. So his brother, Jonathan Nolan, wrote a story called Memento Mori. It's only like 5 pages or something, which is what he turned into
this.
Memento.
Okay.
And I've read the short story. Pretty different.
Okay.
But you can see clear parallels. But you can see how he took this and said, all right, for this to be a movie, it has to be significantly more going on.
Much bigger story, obviously. Yeah. Okay. So how, it sounds like, especially that Memento screenplay, had to be something more akin to like the Charlie Kaufman stuff, much more unconventional and...
In terms of structure, yes, but in terms of narrative arc and everything, it's a pretty straightforward movie. It's just told in reverse.
Just works it backwards. Okay.
Yeah. So in some ways, it's almost more Tarantino.
Okay.
Right, because I mean, Pulp Fiction's not reversed, but it's cut up.
Sure. So what does a Charlie Kaufman screenplay look like? Is it just
looks like a
madness?
Script. It looks normal. I mean, they still follow by and large 90% of the expected format.
Okay.
But structurally, it doesn't always make sense. Like you can't say, all right, when is this going to happen in this movie?
Okay.
You know, because you don't know. It's such often mind teases.
Sure.
It's messing with you. You don't know what's going on.
So reading it itself is a little bit more of a trip than actually watching the movie. You're sort of.
But that's also can be helpful because reading screenplays can be a chore. They're not always that much fun because they're blueprints.
Okay.
Who likes to look at a blueprint? Would you rather look at the house?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, how much does the quality of the writing and the screenplay sort of play into it becoming a good movie? Or is it just these people can look at this sort of framework and make it a good movie? Is there actual great writing happening in the screenplay?
That's a great question. And I would say it depends very much on the writer.
Okay.
There are some screenplays where there is great
and it just blows you away.
Yeah, there are some that I would say this is art. You know, this is an art form in and of itself. I get pleasure out of reading the script.
Who writes those?
I really enjoy Kaufman's.
Okay.
I really enjoy Tarantino's.
Okay.
A lot of that has to do with the fact that they're also often directing.
Sure.
Or at least have an idea of who the director is already.
Sure.
In Kaufman's case, sometimes. So Tarantino, if he gave a spec to somebody, if he was an unknown, they would say this doesn't work because he gives a lot of notes to himself, and instead of a 3-line action line, he'll have a 10 or 15-line action line because he's telling himself a story and he has notes built into it for himself.
So that when he goes to make it, he remembers exactly.
Exactly. And by and large, you should avoid those types of what are called unfilmables.
Okay.
Because, I mean, if you can't
it's just
see
taking
it
up room
it's
at
happening,
that point.
it's just taking up room. It's not helping anything. But on the flip side, there are some people who don't write well at all, but have great ideas.
Okay.
Offhand, I'm struggling to think of a screenwriter that fits that because I wouldn't read their script.
Sure.
It's
not going to get anything out of someone.
But I would put them on par in terms of story writing with like a Philip K. Dick, a Kurt Vonnegut.
Great ideas, but the text itself might not be sterling.
Exactly.
Okay.
So there's a saying in Hollywood: concept is king. So if you can come up with something that's high concept, often people will buy the script even if the script sucks. They'll be like, this is such a great idea. It's a movie. I know it's a movie. I'm going to make this movie. I don't care what the script looks like.
Okay.
Right?
At that point, do they bring someone in to rewrite the script?
They often have people that rewrite scripts or polish scripts, yeah.
Sure.
Most directors have people that they like that they've worked with before that they'll at least have polish it, whether or not they get a credit or not. They'll say, hey, make this how I like it. But I haven't read the script, so I don't know if it's any good or not, but a great idea would be something like Speed. You know, you just tell somebody,
look, man, there's a bomb on the bus.
And if the bus slows down,
all right.
That's a movie.
The guy's like, I'm in.
Right.
Sounds great.
I mean, and that boiled down, simple, what's the word I'm looking for? Synopsis.
Sure.
You know, is generally called a log line.
Okay.
You know, it's 35, 40 words, 1 to 2 sentences.
It's a pitch.
Exactly. It's the entire movie boiled down. If you can't summarize your movie, if you can't get everything you need to do in 35 to 40 words for someone, it's difficult to get them to even think of it as a movie.
Okay. So that's on top of page 1. That's before you even.
That's before you send the script. That's not on the script. That's the query email. It's like, hey, I've written this thriller.
Is it like an abstract sort of thing?
It's much shorter.
Okay.
Much shorter.
Sure.
I mean, it's a sentence.
You've got it. It's a sentence to pitch your movie.
Yeah. You say, here's the title. It's a thriller. Here's the log line.
Right.
Would you be interested in reading this script?
Oh, this sounds like the best of like flash fiction.
Oh yeah.
Is what it sounds like.
And they're a pain.
I would think so, to perfect, because you spend as much time on that as you do like.
So, I mean, going back to the writing process, often after the outline, we'll spend just as much time trying to come up with the log line. So we have a crystal clear idea. This is what the movie's about. So that if we ever lose our focus while we're writing and we're like, no, this is it. This is the idea that we're trying to sell here.
See, now that's a concept that sounds very poetic to me, these log lines. It sounds like something that you've been trained to, and it sounds, I'm sort of excited about writing log line poems or something. It's
yourself out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was interesting. I didn't even know that was a part of it. That to me sounds like the hardest part, like that sentence compared to like the writing the 100 pages. It's a completely different.
It's really a totally separate part because it's more on the marketing, selling, getting somebody to read it side. It has nothing at all to do with
the actual quality of the writing and the structure. It's just how good is the idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I get somebody who reads 5 scripts a day interested and willing to spend their time reading this script?
Read the actual first page of the script as opposed to this. Okay. Yeah. Start with that and go, well, that's fascinating. I had no idea that existed. Yeah. And now I'm really intrigued. Adam, you've been taking notes. Did you write that down? That sounds good. All right, well, we are going to sit down and actually eat all of this beautiful red beans and rice. So thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for teaching me about screenwriting, which I tried very poorly when I was a much younger man, and now just stick in my lane.
Well, I look forward to helping me make a movie later this year.
I'm going to cook food for a movie.
And maybe film some.
Yeah.
And maybe run through the woods.
Whatever they need. I'm running through the woods, man. Die on camera, whatever you need.
Make fake bones.
Mix
fake blood. I don't know.
We're going to learn.
We're going to have to
learn a lot of things. All right.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
Good luck with it. We'll be back next month for another cookbook. We all know how to make red beans and rice Zackary Hill style. They were delicious, and now we also know how to go about writing a screenplay. So I expect all of you to go out and make your own damn movie, please. Next month, it's looking like we're going to have a guest finally from the Columbus Museum of Art. They've been busy celebrating and getting that new wing opened up. So that'll be our guest. I know we're going to have Les K coming up soon. And there's some other guests that are going to join us in the summertime. In terms of Sundress, I know everyone's getting geared up for the release of Best of the Net, They're finishing the coding as we speak, so that should be out in March. And then everyone's headed to AWP to celebrate the titles that have been released over the last year. Les Kay's book, The Bureau, Sandy Marchetti's book, Confluence, Emma Huey's book, Ha 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 Thump, which is incredible. Those are all available on the website right now, and you can run into them doing readings and at the table at AWP. So hopefully they'll get to see you in Los Angeles, and I will see you next month for the next edition of Cookbook.